All right. Wednesday, April 2nd. You know what Wednesday means? Oh, I am at my ex-wife's house. I'm at my baby's mama's house. Getting myself sat down here in my ex-wife's little mini recording studio. Thank you, Jenny, for letting me. My daughter is finishing her science homework. And I'm going to sit down to read you guys a little story that I wrote called Such a Fuss. So I am very interested in the concept of neurodivergent expression. And I'm also interested in how neurodivergence can express itself under the paradigm of somebody who's been abused. And so that's what this story is about. It's somebody who's very neurodivergent who had an abusive parent. Without any further ado, I bring to you Such a Fuss by yours truly, Tony Cheslock. Franklin had not been to the airport in a very long time, because it had been such a very long time since he had anywhere to be. As he fumbled with his phone, the anxiety that was ever present had transformed into something more sinister. He desperately tried to touch the screen in such a way as to bring an absolute stranger to his home to take him to the airport. This was a thing he feared. But then again, Franklin feared most things. All the same, though, Abdul had tasked Franklin with this part of the trip preparation because it was good for him. Abdul calmly watched Franklin stumble through the act of ordering a ride, confident that this activity would provide him some manner of structure and thus a healthy dose of dopamine. Meanwhile, Franklin was on the 4th level of hell, anguishing over the digital interface of the rideshare app. "What if I never make it to the airport?" Franklin cried into his own brain pan. "What if this person, from my phone, with their car, drives me somewhere quiet and beautiful only to cut off my arms and my legs and keep me as some trophy in their New Jersey garage of oddities?" Franklin boomed into the open air of his kitchen. "Very clever wordplay, Franklin, but that one came out so that I could hear it," tissed Abdul. "Just keep at it, and you'll get us a ride," Abdul reassured him. Franklin had a hard time knowing when the words were out or in. He almost never knew where they came from, and he never knew what lay under those words. It could be memories of a ham sandwich that had gone bad, which he was forced to eat, or memories of being locked in a car trunk by the father. Franklin's dad called himself the father. "Franklin, you will listen to the father when he speaks to you, or I'll be decorating the floor with your teeth," his dad would scream in his sleep. Whether the father's words were said while he was awake, or if they came out of him when he was in layers of evil sleep, Franklin always heard those words loud and clear. The father made sure of that by installing an ever-present loudspeaker system which was wired throughout every room in their home. The master device, his dad called it, was located directly next to the father's bed. There was a large microphone which was always on, and handheld inputs which responded only to the father's touch. The father was a very successful corporate attorney, the perfect hiding spot for a violent psychopath. Just enough prestige to inspire respect from most people, and enough of a black box that Franklin's dad, Bonifacio, could live his life and do his work as he pleased. From the outside, Bonifacio seemed like a positive member of society. After the untimely death of his wife Millie, Bonifacio was applauded for working so hard to provide a good life for Franklin. Nobody ever caught on to the abject abuse that Franklin suffered, but they sure knew how incredibly sad, yet stoic, Bonifacio had become after the accident. This particular morning, Franklin was readying himself to leave his house for the first time in 6 months. The last time he left his house was for a funeral as well, but it was for a pen pal of his named Joey. Joey had died of heat stroke in his Upper West Side apartment, the victim of a hot June day in NYC and unmedicated hypertension. Although the outside world is like fire on Franklin's skin, he was steeling himself to get into the car of a complete stranger to eventually board an airplane to Denver for the father's funeral. The father had died in a skiing accident. Franklin hesitated to call it an accident because he had hoped for the father to pass from this mortal coil while riding skis. Franklin thought, on many levels, he had ordered up the father's death like a TV show on a streaming service. Joyously, yet horrifically, Franklin had received word that his thoughts had finally come to fruition. This seems like a blessing. Since the last time Franklin had left the house for a pen pal's funeral 6 months ago, however, he had also envisioned himself being torn apart by wild dogs on his front lawn. His seemingly preternatural ability to create visions that could come true made it also seem like a curse. The text message on his phone popped up telling Franklin that his driver, Maureen, would arrive in 6 minutes. 6 minutes was plenty of time for Franklin to steel himself for the journey to the airport. 6 minutes was also enough time to imagine that there was a landmine on his front porch that would blow him to chunky bits all over his front door as soon as he left his house. This eventuality would leave his driver Maureen a gory surprise and would no doubt traumatize them for the remainder of whatever life they had left on this planet. It would also leave a huge list of things for Abdul to clean up. "Franklin, don't forget your brother," said Abdul. Abdul was tenderly holding a rubber doll baby. Franklin had adopted his brother a few years ago after a particularly hectic bout of sleepwalking. He had walked down the stairs and out of his home while dead asleep and had ended up in a dumpster outside of a pizza shack. This dumpster was roughly 4 miles from the brownstone Franklin and Abdul lived in. When Franklin finally was conscious enough to take in what was happening, he was suddenly more afraid than he ever had been, and just before the squad car pulled up is the moment Franklin met his long-lost brother there amongst the discarded and greased pizza boxes. It was his homecoming of sorts that made Franklin realize he wasn't alone in this big dark world after all. Word got to the father that Franklin could no longer live alone, and thus the offer was extended for Abdul to be hired on as a full-time live-in caretaker. "Oh my goodness, Abdul, I've been so worried about this trip that I almost forgot all about Harry," retorted Franklin. Franklin reached out for Harry with shaking hands and a trembling lip as he gently took his brother from Abdul. He cradled his brother close to his chest while he was whispering tender and neurotic things directly into his plastic doll face. As Franklin reassured himself that he was a good brother, with his ritualized and jittery movements, all the while, Harry stared blankly upward at nothing. Abdul breathed a deep sigh as he looked at Franklin, fussing over Harry. Abdul often wondered how this caretaker job would ever translate to other employment. At the end of that thought, he always remembered the money that he was making. The fee for his service was astronomically out of balance with what he actually had to do for Franklin. Abdul was there basically to make sure Franklin didn't go off the deep end. On most days, this was as easy as making sure that Franklin ate enough, was staying clean, and that his brother Harry was never too far out of reach. Every once in a while, though, despite all of Abdul's best efforts, Franklin would go off the deep end and he would turn violent. After the last time this happened, Abdul saw to it that all the knives in the house for food preparation would be forever on his person, well out of reach. Abdul then smiled and looked over at Franklin, whispering sweet nothings into Harry's lifeless and plastic face. "Oh, Harry, I love you so much," Franklin cooed. "Now try it in Polish, Franklin. The father loves it when you try your Polish," Abdul requested. Franklin smiled an uneven, broken smile, looked at Harry's pebble-sized black pupils, and said, "Tak Bożo, się kocham, Harry." Then he followed up with winking at Harry's endlessly staring doll eyes and said, "Oh, Harry, you know how Abdul is. He is always such a fuss." Thanks so much for listening, and don't forget, there is a link in the show notes if you want to go ahead and read along with me, or, read it on your own, and then listen to this again, so you could, read it on your own, and listen to this again while you read it again, is what I'm trying to say. What a head trip that would be. So yeah, neurodivergent expressions of an abused man who found communion with a plastic doll. Thank you guys so much, and have a great day, and I love you.